Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Fort, and we are here for another poetry discussion. A poetry discussion from the mind of Charles Bukowski, The Pleasures of the Damned. The poem happens on page 159. Look, we've got new videos here on the channel Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Mondays are for poetry. I also have new videos on my personal channel Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, a link to which can be found in the description below. The poem in question here is known as The Tragedy of Leaves. I awakened to dryness, and the ferns were dead, the potted plants yellow as corn. My woman was gone, and the empty bottles, like bled corpses, surrounded me with their uselessness. The sun was still good, though, and my landlady's note cracked in fine and undemanding yellowness. What was needed now was a good comedian, ancient style, a jester, with jokes upon absurd pain. Pain is absurd, because it exists, nothing more. I shaved carefully with an old razor, the man who had once been young and said to have genius. But that's the tragedy of the leaves, the dead ferns, the dead plants, and I walk into a dark hall where the landlady stood, execrating a final, sending me to hell, waving her fat, sweaty arms, and screaming for rent, because the world had failed us both. I think that the core irony here is the irony of the word leaves. Leaves being those things which flee the trees in the fall, leaves on plants, but also leaves as in the current tense of going. Bukowski wakes up. My woman was gone. And in the midst of this all, the fall here, in the midst of the fall here, Bukowski is getting a sheet of paper, a leaf of paper, telling him he's got to go too. Telling him he is no longer welcome here because he has not paid his rent. Screaming for rent because the world had failed us both. The irony circling the word leaves. Leaves of fall. Leaves from the plants which are dead. My woman was gone. She had left. The man who was once considered a genius. The plant was once considered alive, was once thriving. The writer was once a genius. But no more. Seeing those leaves on the ground are a sign of a coming winter, the hard time. That leaf of paper stuck to Bukowski's Chiansky's door. A sign of a hard time to come, a sign of the coming winter, of the coming brutality of nature. That is the central irony around which I think this poem is constructed, but it does not stop there. Bukowski in this poem asks for a comedian, a jester. What was needed now was a good comedian, ancient style, a jester, with jokes upon absurd pain. Pain is absurd because it exists, nothing more. It is absurd in its very existence. The irony of a speaker willing to go to that length to say that pain is absurd in its very existence, despite the fact that that speaker finds himself in this poem at the very beginning in a great deal of pain. We're not just talking about the woman who has left. We're not just talking about the eviction notice. We're not just talking about the fact that he has to find some way to pay this rent or he is gone. Empty bottles like bled corpses surrounded me with their uselessness. The extreme pain of being an alcoholic is an extreme pain which does not subside. The extreme pain of being an alcoholic, being a functional alcoholic, is the extreme pain which requires itself to exist and is therefore absurd because it is absurd. Absurdity in the dry heaves that an alcoholic will go through without alcohol. The jitters that an alcoholic will get without alcohol. So the only cure to the pain is that which causes the pain, the withdrawals of alcohol, painful. If pain is absurd because it exists, the pain of being an alcoholic is pain which exists in absurdity because of an absurd thing, because of an irony. How fair is Bukowski? If we're talking about absurdity, the absurdity of the universe is that it is not fair. That is, the unfair nature of the universe is that which normally leads individuals to concede that the universe is absurd. How fair is our speaker? I think that's a question which can often be asked about Bukowski. How fair is the speaker? The speaker seems to have a negative tinge on things at almost all times. But is that a fair assessment? Here we have the landlord, the landlady, waving her fat, sweaty arms and screaming for rent. Rent because the world had failed us both. How honest a statement is that? It seems to me that, though negative, the speaker, Chinaski, the poet, Bukowski, is quite often very fair, very fair. This fairness might not be lighthearted, might not be favorable fairness, but the fairness is neither judgmental to the extreme. He does not pass that extreme a judgment on the landlady here, just an assessment which is unfavorable, but an assessment nonetheless. So is this a commentary on the unwavering absurdity of the universe and the fact that in the face of this unwavering absurdity which is highlighted by the unfair nature of the universe, that the only way forward is our own fairness. The only way forward is to recognize absurdity. The only way forward is to revel in that pain. That seems to be a fairly consistent message throughout Bukowski, throughout Chinaski. Yes, everything is absurd. Yes, pain is absolute. Yes, pain will happen. That doesn't mean we have to let the pain win. Even in the worst hours, even when we're surrounded by worthlessness through the emptiness of bottles bled like corpses. That is all I have for this poetry discussion, or this poetry series of questions. I'm not sure, maybe that would be a more apt description of this video. But like I say, I do have new videos on this channel every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Mondays are for poetry. A lot of Bukowski happening lately. I also have new videos on my personal channel Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Over there, I do not do poetry. I do not do fiction. I do nonfiction sometimes. I have read-alongs over there of, right now I've got a read-along going on of a Leonardo da Vinci biography from Walter Isaacson. I do movie reviews over there. I talk about goal-setting stuff over there. I talk about just different stuff on a weekly basis. And if you have any suggestions, I do a series over there called Ask Adrian Anything. So if there are questions that you have for me, maybe consider going there and leaving them on that channel or in the comment section below here. But yeah, that is all I have for this poetry discussion. And I hope to see you next time for more.